Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 273rd Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the First Amendment to the Constitution, specifically the clauses that pertain to the freedom of speech and the right to assemble. The First Amendment to the Constitution states in part, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. That's the way it says it, peaceably to assemble. Today's discussion begins with Mike Reese of Howard Hanna Real Estate and current candidate for the Wadsworth City Council. Then Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Then Susan Hanlon, retired dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron, followed by Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired teacher of mathematics at Wadsworth High School. Mike, the First Amendment to the Constitution appears clear in the way it deals with the freedoms of speech and the right to assemble. Yet these two rights have been the subject of much controversy in recent times. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts actually on that, but I'm going to try to stick with some of the facts that I was able to dig up here. The um, First Amendment, which was adopted in 1791, which in the Bill of Rights is, and even before that, where did that even come from? Our founding fathers who came up with all this stuff were heavily influenced from the Enlightenment thinkers of Europe, people like John Locke who believed in our natural rights, and Montesquieu who believed in separation of powers, uh, Rousseau who believed that people had the ultimate authority. These were the people that our founding fathers had looked at when they came up with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So just to get an idea of where these ideas originally came from, these were kind of the push back against the natural order of things in Europe at the time. Like the hold the church had on the continent, the hold that monarchs had on the continent. These were radical ideas at the time that they don't have the power, the people do. Um, so that's kind of where I started. Those are where did this come from in the first place? Over the years there have been a lot of tests to the power of the First Amendment, um, what constitutes free speech, what is protected, what's not protected. There are a lot of people that believe that oh, this it says this is that's it. You can do and say whatever you want, it's protected. But we've had a number of court cases over the years that kind of shown the limits of that ultimate power. Um, there's been a lot of issues with things like hate speech, which there was a case, RAV versus City of St. Paul, that decided, okay, it might be deplorable hate speech, but it is still protected under the First Amendment. So, that's been an ongoing kind of battle since day one almost. There was a case, Virginia versus Black, that some things are they free speech? Are they not? In this case, it was the burning of crosses. Um, they decided that was not free speech because it represented a direct threat of violence. So, there was they tried to make a distinguish between what is, just saying something or something that will cause immediate threats of violence to people. Um, things it does not protect are, true threats, what they call. And this was another court case, Counterman versus Colorado, that decided that true threats were not protected, and this case was particularly based on intent. So if the threat had the intent to cause immediate violence, then that speech would not be protected. So that's a couple of the things that were covered by those court cases. Does not protect threats of incitement to violence, defamation, obscenity, child pornography, fraud and perjury. This is still an ongoing battle, but these are some of the things that we decided as a nation through court cases that those were not acceptable forms of free speech. Um, Kind of in the modern age, it's become, even worse. You have with the internet and technology, you have what's called, weaponized free speech, which people are using free speech under the guise to harass and abuse others. And that's something that, we're still kind of dealing with on a legal basis, like what is acceptable and what is not based on the law. Disinformation is a huge problem with the internet. It really impairs the ability of citizens to make reasoned decisions because there's so much, you're getting bombarded constantly with so many false things that it makes it hard to separate what is true and what is real. So as far as free speech goes, I'll stop there. The right to assemble is another, and I think we could spend all day on either of those issues.
Mhm.
The right to assemble, that's been protected as well. And I like the wording in the right to peacefully assemble is the key thing. Obviously, riots and destruction of property are not something that would be covered under uh peaceful right to assemble. So that's, I mean, in my opinion, that's a whole completely other issue. Um, but here we are. So
Well, appreciate that. Patty, what are your thoughts?
I thought I was last. Sorry. Um, um, Free speech, as Mike said, is something that some people think that it means you can do and say anything, and it's not limited, and yet it is limited and needs to be. I mean, there are very specific things you cannot do. I mean, you cannot libel someone. Is it in print? Is it libel or is it slander? I always get those two mixed up, but you can't
libel is print.
Print. Okay, so you cannot slander someone. You cannot spew pornography. You cannot incite people to violence, whether that be in the form of an assembly or just by your speech. So there are ways to limit. It's not totally free speech. I think it's more the fact that the government cannot hold you accountable for speech just because they disagree with you. There are certain places where obviously free speech doesn't apply. For example, in public education, I mean, as a former teacher, I could tell my students that they couldn't speak at all, and I wasn't denying them free speech. There are certain things that you can and can't do at certain times, but it's more as a way to prevent you from being discriminated against because your opinions are different than others. This has come into view recently with the firing and cancellation of certain late show talk hosts. There were moves made and people were after certain ones because they disagreed with what they had said. And to me, that's totally an example of they should have the free speech and the right to say it. And if you don't like it, you could just turn the TV off. I think there are people that tried, especially from a comedian, that do this on both sides. And that right to say that has to be protected. And I think that we're seeing, like with Jimmy Kimmel, the fact that he was brought back on the air, I think was an example of free speech being honored. Now, you may not have agreed with what he said. That's not the point. It's the same as when, was it in Skokie, Illinois, where years ago, where they had a great number of Holocaust survivors lived, and the KKK decided to have a rally there. And the ACLU actually defended the KKK, saying that they had the right to speak at that occasion, at that rally. And that was because of free speech. As long as they didn't incite people to violence at that rally, they were entitled to do it. Another thing that's coming into play right now, of course, is all of the protests and rallies that are taking place across the country in opposition of the present government. These and particularly in the case of against ICE policies, these are allowed and should be allowed as long as they are peaceful. Once they are no longer peaceful, then absolutely, that's when the police should step in and stop the rally or stop the protesters that are being non-peaceful. But to prevent them from being there, or to simply tell them they have to disengage and shoot whatever at them, that is not allowed, because they are supposed to be allowed to assemble freely. I think it'll be interesting this weekend, because there's something like 2,500 different rallies for part of the No Kings rally that are supposed to take place this Saturday.
I mean, the what kind of rallies?
The No Kings rally.
No King.
Kings.
Okay.
Right.
That's a new one on me.
They've actually had these before, and this is a big push right now, and they're scheduled to be all over the country. And I've actually seen ads for them. I hope that they remain peaceful, because they have a message they want to get out, and that's great. But hopefully it will stay peaceful, and we can move on from there. And
what is their message?
They're against government overreach. And the idea with No Kings is that our president is not a king and does not have sole authority to do all of the things that he's presently done.
Gotcha.
So a great deal of it has to do with the ICE situation. It also has to do with the fact that we have U.S. troops now in numerous cities across the United States, whether it be Memphis or in Chicago or Los Angeles and Portland, and soon to come to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And they're opposing that. So.
Okay, Bryan, I'm very sorry that I overlooked you. Patty is second on my screen, and I just got confused.
That's okay. I understand. My free speech isn't as important as hers.
Oh,
that's true.
I think everything that's been said, I can agree with. As far as the importance of free speech, you stand up in a movie theater and yell fire when there's no fire. You can't threaten people. You can't defame people. You can't slander people. And what's happened is that because we had the pendulum went so far to the left during a variety of issues, people were being canceled. People's speech was being throttled and censored on Twitter, on Facebook. And that was one of the main reasons why Elon Musk bought Twitter. And there is some very good reporting. It's called the Twitter Files. And if you want to see censorship along the lines of something you would see in a communist country like China or Russia or Cuba, you look at some of the memos and read some of the memos that were going around Twitter that had their genesis in the federal government. People in the government were threatening and putting pressure on social media to censor, to deplatform, to basically throttle, in that, the message wouldn't get out. It was shadow banned because they didn't like the message that was going out. As far as, Joe Rogan was a very, very interesting case. And I'm surprised the guy hasn't sued the pants off of CNN. I'm surprised he doesn't own CNN by now, because they took what he said on his podcast, that he was taking ivermectin. It was prescribed to him, and ivermectin is not just a horse medication. And they convoluted that whole thing and made it sound like, and they also took his picture and they made his picture look like he was sick. And he puts this up on his podcast on a regular basis to remind people what some of the legacy media did to him to basically make him look like a fool and to further the narrative that everybody needed to get the vaccine and everybody needed to wear the mask and all that kind of stuff. And that was totally wrong. So, people have the right to express their opinions, whether you like it or not. And, a lot of people say, well, Twitter was a private company, but it's been shown that social media is now the public square. And if Patty wants to put something on her Facebook page, or if Mike wants to put something on his Facebook page and I don't have to agree with it, and I don't agree with it, he has the right to put that up there. I can keep scrolling. And when a government steps in and says, wait a second, we don't like that narrative. The narrative that we're trying to push is this. And through a variety of means and resources, they put pressure on social media platforms. Mark Zuckerberg even testified before Congress that the FBI sent him sort of letters of intent or letters of interest, and phone calls were made that, hey, you know what? What you're allowing being posted on Facebook is really crossing the line as far as free speech and stuff. And the guy caved. So I think we really have to be careful just because, what's the definition of hate speech? I understand. I agree with 90% of it, but you can't just throw everything in hate speech and say, well, we need to protect people because they can't hear this. Some things we need to hear whether we like it or not. So as far as it's the First Amendment, and it's the First Amendment for a reason. And this is what separates us from a lot of other countries. And I will quickly add that they are rounding up. Britain is now going door to door and policing people's comments on social media. It's not something that's been made up, or it's not something that, somebody's blown out of proportion. They arrested a comedian because he made comments. They called it transphobic comments at a show he did out of the country. And when he came back, they met him at the airport. Now, that's the kind of stuff, I'm not for that at all. We don't go there. A comedian, Bill Barr, a comedian, a U.S. comedian, I don't really particularly care for his type of comedy. He has been deplatformed and in essence canceled because of his views on particular issues, trans issues and things of that nature, abortion issues. You don't even see that guy anymore. So I think we have to be very careful that we don't fall into that trap again that we found ourselves in not that long ago, where people were just being deplatformed, censored because it didn't fit the ongoing narrative. And people were saying, well, that's hate speech. If I don't agree with a particular policy issue, or if I don't agree with the way a person lives their life, I can't express that opinion. No, I think you can, and that should be protected free speech under the First Amendment. So I'll leave it at that.
I apologize for relocating you.
That's okay. That's fine.
No, I didn't want you to be last. I really didn't.
So I first of all, I really appreciate Mike's historic history lesson at the beginning. I appreciate that. And it made me, take a minute and think about, that First Amendment. At its core, I think the intention was that we needed to have the right to speak against our government and speak against the ruling class, and to express different ideas, speak against about the church, speak against the church and have your own freedom of religion and all that. So I really do think when you talk about the First Amendment, it is the core of being American. And I know from my experience working with international students, and my daughter works with international students at University of Pennsylvania, in this recent round of, the Palestinian Israel crisis, the war, she said what struck her with the Palestinian students, they thought that everybody speaking against them should be rounded up and put in jail. And they just could not understand why people were allowed to say negative things about them and about, the Palestinians in general. And, they tried to explain to them, you're in the United States. This is what we do. You can't take this. You need to leave. This is it, and it's not going to change. And I, Bryan, you brought up what I had been thinking about and helped me kind of solidify what I was trying to think about. And that is the irony to me of the political correctness that we've had for years, right? You can't say this, you can't say that, you can't use this word. What's the new term for this group? What's the new term for this group, and another group? But yet they think they should be but then they get all upset when people get fired because they said something against Charlie Kirk. Okay. So, and Trump is the same way. It's very schizophrenic almost. It's like, we swung all the way and I do think some of the increase in crazy speech, if you want to put it that way, hate speech, whatever, is this backlash against political correctness that, I felt like we got to a point, especially being in academia, where I had to speak in code, and it reminded me of the Victorian times, and they had this whole list of things you couldn't say, it wasn't proper to say. And so they basically did speak in code. And women used to use their fans, to express their romantic interests and that kind of stuff. It went so far. Now it's like the Wild West, everybody gets on social media in particular. I have yet to hear anybody say this stuff face to face. Right. You hear it on the radio, you hear Trump in front of a microphone, but has anybody ever said this stuff to you, or will they even say it in a group of people when you're like, I've had the experience where what people say on Facebook, and then you're in a group and you're talking to them face to face and they don't say any of that stuff, So it's really important. It's a hard time right now, but I think we just need to just realize that's what free speech is.
I'd like to share an experience that I personally had.
Yeah.
At the beginning of COVID. There was a bunch of doctors and very smart people. They put together a letter, right. I'm having one of those brain fog moments. Like it was like the Behringer letter or something like that. 2,500 or so very well credentialed people signed the letter. They were all from the medical field, and it was not what the current narrative was on COVID. They talked about, what alternative treatments could be. They talked about different treatments that should happen. They disagreed with the way things were going. And I shared that on Facebook. And I don't know how many people reported me, but I got a notice from Facebook that said, you either take this down or we're going to put you in Facebook jail for 30 days. And I said, you know what? Go ahead, put me in jail. Yeah. I think I got suspended for like 30 days. I couldn't post anything. I could read, but I couldn't post anything. Now, to me, that's scary.
That is scary.
That it wasn't some crackpot. And now when you read and you go back, these guys were like, we told you. There were some from Yale, Harvard, Stanford. They were all credentialed. They'd all had peer-reviewed articles. They weren't just, some crackpot out there saying, oh, drink bleach,
Yeah.
It was a very well-reasoned letter, and I shared it. And man, I'm telling you, talk about a swarm of hornets.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you can't
like
say
that lady, there was a woman that she did work at a university in Wisconsin, and she put something up. She said, if you like Charlie Kirk, you can't be a friend of mine. She got fired.
Yeah.
That's just.
What happened to her?
She got fired.
Yeah.
She got fired. Yeah. You hear all kinds of examples of people that were, Trump went after people, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then,
I'll agree with you there.
And
it
the
is crazy.
bad thing is, So then what it does is people lead to just say, okay, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to be quiet.
Not
I'm
gonna
not
say
going to
anything.
say it. And that's even more dangerous.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
somebody can enlighten me just a little bit. I'm a little bit confused about the troops going after the anti-ICE people. I'm not sure what's going on there. The people that are opposed to ICE, what are they doing that deserves military intervention?
I don't know.
I'm not sure what you're asking, John.
Yeah.
Here's what I see the issue being is that the protesters have a right to protest. But if you start blocking the entrance to a federal facility, these ICE detention centers are considered federal facilities. A federal building they have certain rights. The federal government can protect those rights. And what I've seen is these groups, Antifa, people that don't like what ICE is doing and all that kind of stuff, they set up and try to block the entrance to these facilities. And that's when they get pepper sprayed, they get hit with a paintball, they get dragged out of the way because they're bringing in people and they're taking out people. They're basically trying to impede their ability to process the illegal aliens that they've been taken off the street. And there's more, what I find interesting, there's more cameras and news people at these things than protesters. I mean,
well, you look at some of the protests that are going on. When we keep hearing about all of the protests in Portland and why, though, we need soldiers, and they go out and they actually take pictures. You're right. It's like two guys dressed as a frog and one dressed in a chicken outfit, and that's supposed to be this great national security risk.
Right.
Well,
make sure that chicken is not blocking the exit.
We've just gotten the signal that our time is up, folks. That was a wonderful. I appreciate that.
That was good discussion.
So, Aiden, you can sign us off.
Yeah. Bryan, were you talking about Bill Maher? Did you say Bill Maher when you talked about the comedian?
No, Bill Burr.
Bill Burr.
Bill Burr.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
He's funny.
I don't particularly care for some of his humor. Nate Bargatze, I like the clean guys.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Nate
he's a lot
Bargatze.
dirtier, Bill Burr.
Yeah, Bill Burr had he had some pretty.
He's no Andrew Dice Clay, but he's
right. He's not Andrew Dice Clay, but
I've
but
never
he
heard of him.
Yeah, he makes some, and it's his opinion. Does he deserve to get deplatformed and his YouTube videos taken off?
You were talking about like with social media and the government having their hands in it, but they're kind of doing that now. The Pentagon, like, look at all the people that all the news organizations just packed up their stuff this morning and moved it out of the Pentagon rather than follow like the oppressive rules that they put in place for what they could say and could not. The White House does that. We don't like how you report us. We're kicking you out of the press room.
I think that's what they want.
He just doesn't call on them.
That's what they want. They don't want anything.
No, he's kicked them out before.
Well, the thing is, it's funny, is that Fox News refused to sign that quote.
And they should refuse because there should be transparency.
Refuse to sign what? Well,
except that put out that memo saying that that all the news stations had to sign that they would not, it was basically against leaking, would not leak any information unless it had been, unless they had gotten permission from somebody to whatever. And
I thought they had to pass a physical fitness test. That's what I thought.
And
I thought they had to do so many push-ups, so many pull-ups.
All of the networks said, no, we're not doing that. That's not the way we
that's an absolute violation of freedom of speech.
Well, and there's also a lot of question on the freedom of speech deal when you look at the statements made by Carr and towards ABC and towards CBS.
Yeah.
They have
It goes both ways, though. I mean, we had
That's
4
what I'm saying. You were
years.
talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
4
absolutely.
years. I
It does
would
go
watch
both
those
ways. It
press
shouldn't go
conferences.
either
Stuff
way,
on
though.
Twitter
You know,
and stuff.
it really
Yeah, they
shouldn't.
were ridiculous. Yeah.
Newsmax was never called on.
Right.
They had their go-tos. It goes both ways.
Oh yeah, and
That's
Trump
what's
now
so.
refuses to call on ABC because George Stephanopoulos beat up on JD Vance. I mean,
And I don't know what that was about, but I'll tell you
I
that
saw
Hitch
that
had more.
interview.
That guy has more press conferences.
Oh,
I wish he would just shut up for a little
yeah,
while.
no
Yeah,
kidding.
me too. I like him, but I'm tired of him already.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't even like
he
him.
just can't stop. He can't help himself.
No,
The more somebody talks, the more likely they are to say something really stupid.
Mhm.
And that's he does that a lot. I mean,
well, if his lips are
I think,
moving, it's
just dial it back a little bit. I mean, you don't have to, you don't have to argue
lips
everything.
froze up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, folks,
hey, it's great talking with everybody.
Okay.
We'll
Nice
see
seeing
ya.
everybody. I'll see you all
See ya.
soon.
Bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.